For our final project, we will be focused on Zoom with the primary focus on the chat. We chose Zoom because, as can be seen by the graph on the right side, there are trillions of users, meaning this application is easily accessible to anyone and widely recognized across nations. As many people use the application, many find wide ranges of issues.
Okay, so how we did the data gathering is that we used both naturalistic observation method as well as interviews. We first observed how our own classes on Zoom about how other students use Zoom and observe what errors have happened. And then we created our first interview based on what we have observed with a broad perspective of how people use different functions that Zoom has. And after the first interview, we noticed that how most frustrations were happened with that chat function. So we decided to do a secondary interviews with just focus on the chat. In the interview, we also included a Likert survey that allows interviewees to rate the difficulty level of using those functions. We ended up found out there were still some people are not familiar with how to use chat.
The core issues we found with Zoom are mislocating specific chats when there is spam, placement of the chat window, and unclear signifiers. These main issues come from the format and functions of the current state of the app. It is important for us to establish solutions for the current issues because they create a couple of complicated functions that can be easily simplified and needed. Since Zoom is a communication app, it is important to develop it enough to mitigate common errors since the original creators failed to do so. Chat is more than a side benefit of Zoom. It is one of the main communication services provided and should be developed as such.
So just a little pretext, we did have an initial interview, which was broader than the one we ended up with, but we discovered in this initial interview that people were having issues with the chat. So we decided to focus the project on the chat and conducted another interview, which led us to this analysis. In our new analysis, we saw that when interviewees were asked what things stood out to them about the chat in Zoom, 6 out of 20 interviews specifically responded that they had made errors sending direct messages to everyone and vice versa. When asked to expand on this, we realized that most of these errors were mode error slips and memory-based mistakes, but we took this to mean that the distinction between conversations in our redesign needed to be made abundantly clear compared to this. Additionally, participants had stated that they had issues losing direct message chats in the chat stream. 6 out of 20 interviewees specifically said they had trouble with this, and more often in larger meetings because they'd have to scroll up a lot to find direct messages and respond to them. Overall, we took this to mean that direct messages should be separated from the main chat stream in our redesign to avoid this issue. Additionally, we saw a trend with chat window placement. 10 out of 20 participants specifically stated that they preferred their chat window on the right side. 4 out of 20 participants also said they preferred it on the side, but in a corner, minimized, so it took up less space. And another 4 out of 20 participants expressed frustration with the chat window popping up in the middle of the screen, like in the picture. So we took this all to mean that an ideal design for the window would be an integrated window to the side that takes up a minimal amount of space for a redesign.
Another trend we noticed was in unclear signifiers. So we noticed that the save chat button was unclear, and participants 4, 5, and 7 specifically mentioned the lack of clarity with the 3 dots button where it's normally hidden. 8 out of 20 participants had to guess that the function was in the 3 dots instead of knowing that it was actually there. So the data encouraged us to focus part of our redesign on making it clear where to go in order to save the chat. Another unclear function is the search bar that is shown to find the name of a person to DM. The usage of this bar is unclear. Scrolling is the more commonly used method of finding the right person, as 5 out of 20 participants mentioned that scrolling through the list is an issue for larger meetings, even though the function to search using the search bar already exists. We are thus encouraged to focus the scope of our revised interview questions on the negatives surrounding direct messaging.
So this is our current redesign, and though our main focus was on the chat, we also shifted some of the buttons around to make features more clear and in hopes of decreasing description similarity slips, as some of our interviewees had a hard time directly landing on the chat because the buttons were so small and similar down here. So here the buttons are a little bit bigger and the colors help make it a little bit more distinct. So if we click on the chat, our chat redesign pops up to the side by default. So no matter your screen setting, because that was what was more preferred from our interviewees. interviews, and it's instead of a window sometimes propping up in front. So here, it draws a clear distinction between direct messages and the main room chat, breakout room chats, and even user-made group chats, as a contrast to the original continuous chat stream. And we drew inspiration from Discord for the side panel, where instead of taking up even more space with an email-style inbox, users can see previews of their chats as well as chat names by hovering. And if we click that, here, users can distinguish where their breakout room chats are, as well as revisit them even after the breakout room has ended. And to start a new chat, users click here. And with the magnifying glass, instead of having to scroll, users have a clear place to search who they want to add to their chat. And users can also have the option to make group chats instead of individually direct messaging every person that they wanted to talk to, which is what would have had to be done in the original Zoom design. And once you hit chat, the group chat gets made. And here, once the group chat is made, a new icon pops up on the sidebar for it. The 3 dots here will allow users to add people to group chats as well as change group chat names and other features. Other features we also changed included replacing the attach file and save transcript signifiers with more culturally constant signifiers, as interviewees struggled in tasks of attaching files and saving and finding transcripts. We also added a concrete send button, as well as one of our interviewees had a janky enter key.
Our design space is comparing interchangeability with compactness. This is how easy it is to navigate between different chats and how spaced out those chats are. Zoom is very compact because it all is in one window. However, it's not very interchangeable because you can't differentiate between a direct message and the class chat. Google Meet is also very compact. However, you can't direct message, which makes it not interchangeable. Skype is somewhere in the middle because you can direct message and it saves those chats. However, you can't view the meeting at the same time, which makes it not as compact. Our redesign aims to be both compact and interchangeable. It does this by being able to display both the video and the chat at the same time. However, still opens up different windows for each chat, so you can easily see the difference. Our trade-off is clear signifiers over space. We did this by including bigger buttons and separate panels for different chats.
Overall, certain functions within the chat in a Zoom meeting were confusing to participants, which made it difficult for them to bridge the gulf of execution when using the product in both our test conditions and in real-world situations. Our redesign made it easier to figure out any ambiguous controls and will help users know what to do in a shorter period of time. In the future, we can revisit the idea of confusing functionality within the different meeting controls in Zoom, such as the share screen or reaction functions. Thank you for listening.